I'd rather do a Socratic seminar than journaling.
Yeah,
I hate journaling.
I love talking.
I went through school during the journaling
There's another
phase.
seat up here.
Everything's Journal.
There's another seat up here.
You mean journaling when you practice that, right?
Yeah, essentially. No, when you have to like reflect on what you just learned. For everything, for
Okay.
everything. It was terrible.
We should call it gaslighting 101.
Oh, God, aren't you embarrassed?
So-
It's out here at the video table.
All right, today is Thursday, November 21st. It is after 4:30. We have a quorum. I'm going to bring the meeting of the North Kingstown Temporary Advisory Committee on District Discipline to order. Is there any public comment? I don't see anyone from the public here, so we'll say that that has been satisfied. Did we get the minutes from the last meeting sent out? No?
I feel like I sent them out after the last meeting.
Did any, I didn't see them.
Okay, I'll send them out again.
Okay, we'll table that item
Sorry
until the
about
next
that.
meeting.
I thought I had, I usually try to do it right away because I will forget. Just saying.
No, I know, and that's the reason I wasn't sure, if, like, I just didn't see them. So we'll check on that for the next meeting, and we'll do both 9/16 and 10/21 at the next meeting. Okay. I added the goals back on here just because I always keep them on there for, and we're gonna discuss like an action plan and goal prioritization later, so we don't need to go over them right now. Advisory subcommittee membership. I know we had our, a middle school rep from DMS. She resigned, so we'll need to replace her. So we need someone from middle school. Are there others?
No one that I know that's resigned.
She was our only middle school
Middle
rep.
school person, okay.
So we'll need to request for the administration to make a recommendation on somebody to replace her.
We can send it out to the middle school.
Yeah. So I will send in a request to, I guess, Dr. Huba and the school committee to ask for that, for someone to be appointed. I wanted to look quickly. Do you have it up, Jen?
Yeah,
The-
really, we should, are we still talking about membership?
Yeah,
We should have 4 students.
I know we do have 4, they're not
Okay.
here.
Okay.
One
2
is here.
members of the school committee, 2 members of district administration, 3 building level administrators, elementary, middle, high, 3 teachers, an educational support professional,
We need administrative building professionals from elementary, which we have middle. Do we have anyone from the middle as a building representative?
I don't think we ever did,
Nope,
actually, now that
never had.
we never did.
So that
That's
person
been
needs
Barbara
to be on
Marissa,
there.
David, or Kathy.
So we need
none of
both a
them.
middle school teacher, or was she filling the, well, she's not a building leadership though,
No.
she's just a teacher.
There's no one from the middle
You
schools.
lost
Mm-mm.
Does that say building leadership or does
3
it?
building level administrators, 3 teachers,
Oh,
so it's
3
2
teachers.
separate.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, so we're good.
So we just need a middle school person to replace the middle school teacher.
An educational support professional, a parent slash guardian, a community member, content expert, so 2 separate things,
Oh,
like one, and like not combined.
okay.
How many people is that
How-
total?
Yeah. Do we have
You're gonna
that?
make me do math.
I don't think we have that either.
Can you say it again?
Sure.
Should strive to, so it's
Oh,
not like
a
like
required
should
requirement.
strive to,
Okay.
yes, so 2 members of the school committee, 2
Yep.
members of district administration,
Yep.
3 building level administrators, 3 teachers, an educational support professional, a parent slash guardian, a community member slash content expert, and 4 students.
16 people.
I mean, Joe's K-12, right? Or not? Whatever. You covered middle school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
I think you were the middle school person.
was that?
Or is he the building level administrator?
Well, we have a lot of building administrators.
Well, so who's the 1, 2, 3?
Karen
Not a
was-
lot, but we have some.
Yeah.
And who's the
Cause the
district?
person from DMS, she was
A teacher.
A teacher.
How many teachers do they have besides one?
Two teachers?
Andrew's a teacher.
Yeah.
One,
Two.
And
Two teachers.
I can go look at the original list if you want me to.
That would be,
Let me go look at it,
Helpful.
I have it right here.
since we have to put in a request anyway, let's just make sure we're covered and
Yep.
if there's
I have
anybody
the
else we
original
need them to
list,
look out
hang
for.
on, members. Original members, me and you,
Mhm.
Jen Lima, Jacqueline Turucci, building admin, Joe Renzi, building admin, Carolyn Johnson, building admin, Carla Hodges, parent, Kelly Ryan, parent, Harlan Benetti, teacher, Andrew Propitier, teacher, Jacqueline Lawler, teacher, Alejandra, student, Alexandra, student, Juliet, student, Dylan, student, Lucia, student, Zanaya, student, Sue, and, I already said Harlan Benetti,
Okay.
didn't I? Yeah, yep.
So it's just Jacqueline Lawler that we need to replace.
Mm-hmm.
Does that cover
That's
everybody? Well, you said there would need to be a content expert.
Yeah, maybe Kelly, are you both?
I can be both.
Yeah,
I mean, that sounds funny, but
I
yeah.
think she qualified.
Mm-hmm. I think you're both.
But we never had the.
You are in two subgroups.
I never had a support professional.
We
TA.
added the support professional, I think, right? Or we
Okay.
were missing a support professional.
So we should ask for that too then.
Yeah.
Support professional.
And really, Jacqueline never actually sat on the committee, so we never had her.
I don't remember her coming.
Yeah, she never,
No,
she
yeah.
declined the invitation.
But there was one from DMS that resigned right before the last meeting.
Meeting, yeah.
I can't remember her name, which is really bad.
I don't know.
Hold on.
Yeah, you could, Jacqueline never, cause she's on my DEI committee.
Yep.
Oh, the other teacher has been Harlan Benetti, Andrew, Jacqueline, are the only ones that were teachers. And Sue. Sue's a teacher.
Yeah.
I saw Sue, she's in the corner. Hey,
Yeah,
Sue.
she's down
Hiding.
yeah.
Okay, well,
So what are we actually requesting, so I make sure I put that in the notes?
a support professional
Okay, yep,
and a middle school teacher.
you got it.
Is that it, we believe?
Yeah, I just sent out the notes from the last meeting too,
Okay, perfect.
that was from June.
We'll look at those before the next meeting. Okay,
So I
so
don't
those,
wanna
those
forget.
two we will request the administration to look at. Under new business, if you remember the last time we met, we talked about, we requested for the administration and the school committee to have, we had two requests. One for the middle, to take a look and review the middle school handbook and to try to make
Rachel,
them.
that was from June, the one you just sent.
Yeah,
We had
No.
another meeting this year.
It was,
did I?
Should have been,
Oh, okay.
nine,
Oh, 9/16,
9/16,
sorry.
September
Well, you didn't
16th.
get June, now you're gonna get September 16th too. I said pull it up as a.
Unless I was here and like.
I'm like, it seemed like a
Imagine
really
the whole
long time
thing.
since
No,
we had
October
that.
You
was
never
canceled.
know.
October was
canceled.
canceled because due to a lack of a quorum.
Yes, right.
And then
Did say
we had
that.
one in
Sorry
September
about that,
sixteenth.
people.
Yes.
I said
Okay,
those two.
so we brought it up at the school committee meeting. The administration said they would definitely take a look at the handbooks to see how the differences between how discipline was referred to and the processes and things that they used. It's gonna take a while, obviously, for them to do that. So hopefully they're hoping to take a look at it, I think they said by the end of the school year.
No, they said prior to the start of next year.
Prior to the start, so it could be the summer before they do it, but they were definitely open and willing to do that. So,
I think it's great.
well, so they're at least gonna do that. Also, there's updated discipline, we requested some updated discipline data, which we received. Did that get sent out to everyone?
Yeah, I sent it out, and I
Okay.
put the codes for all the schools for you at the top.
Okay,
So if you're wondering what the codes are, like 23904, Daysville Academy,
109, Fishing Cove.
109, yeah, so I just put them all there so that you know what schools they came from.
So,
I did put in a request, because what they did not include was any kind of student identifier, not that it lists a name or anything, but just to be able to tell, is the same student committing multiple offenses, or are these all individual new people? So cause otherwise, you can't tell if the consequence has increased because the same students recommitted the same thing over again, or is it just a different student, they're handling it in a different way?
You also can't judge like the, disproportionality without that, because you have to like judge it on the, like, you have to pull that out in order to do that, so without the ID number,
You shouldn't be
it's,
able to do it.
we need that. But I started going through and like doing summaries with the data. I got a little behind, so I didn't do it, but it is clear that the data is still disproportionate, so in case anybody was wondering.
Well, I just did the math, and it said, I just did it now when we were talking, 7% of all the 3,374 incidents were black, 60% were white,
If you refresh the screen.
Hispanic was 20%, multiracial was 12%. If you do the math on it,
So, quickly, like I did this quickly, so there were, again, this is not like pulling out for like multiple incidents per
yeah, I didn't do
student.
any of that
There
either,
were,
yeah,
there were a total of 3,300 incidents, right?
yeah.
So, 73% of those were white, 12% were black, 12% were multi, 4% were,
Asian.
Native, American, and, 0% were Asian. But our student population is 81% white, so
So,
underrepresented.
Disproportionate,
Yep.
yeah.
2% is black, 12% was disciplined, so over. 6% are multi, 12% were the discipline, 1% is Native American, 4% were disciplined. So it's clear that even like accounting for, multiple incidents, that the trend continues. So what I started to do before I had to leave to come here was pull in the, like by suspension, right, like to look at that, but even just the first one I got to was like for suspension, the kids who were suspended for cutting class, like 78% of those kids were white against 81% of our population. 9% of those kids were multiracial versus 6% of the population. 8% of the kids were black versus 2% of the population. So again, like the trend continues, and so I think if we dig into the data, we're gonna find the same thing that the equity audit showed us, which is that our students of color are being disproportionately disciplined. I started with race because that's where
Do
we
we
were.
do we have economic,
Oh, I do have it,
All
but
right.
like we
obviously, that's me being
yeah.
selfish in
Yeah,
my
no,
own world.
and I am sure that if we dig into that, then
Yeah.
it's gonna be the same thing, so.
There were a lot of tabs on that,
Yeah.
Well, it's,
with information, bits of information.
Yeah, so
kind of in
my
different
goal
places.
is to be able to like, just kind of show the same, things that the equity audit reported on for this. I really would like to do it, I didn't wanna dive too deep into it without the student ID number, because I wanted to do like apples to apples, and that was with that, but I figured just doing like quick high level, just to not that I expected to be like, oh look, everything was miraculously fixed, but if this does at least show that the trend is still,
I have a silly question. For our lunch description, P and F, is that like paid or free, like qualifies for free or reduced? Is that what that means?
I think so,
Okay.
yeah. And then the other thing that I wanted to kind of, and it goes back to, I started looking at the handbooks for something else that prompted a handbook review, and I think the middle schools, there really is an issue there in terms of the difference between the way that the schools are like disciplining and how that is. So I think really having the district not just update the handbooks, but
The policy.
the policies. I think that is definitely, just looking quickly at this, that comes through too. And I think we all know that, but I think this again lends data behind what we've seen. But yeah, everybody has the data, so if you're like a data nerd like me, like have fun, it's all in there.
But yeah, there are certain pieces that are only on certain tabs, and so you kind of have to
Yeah, I was like trying to.
look through it and figure out what it is, but.
The other thing, just in Carolyn, shout out to you, the only team that has like, SEL team as a, like, action was Quid. And so that was interesting too. And I don't know, DA may
We
have
do
it,
have it on our-
but it's not in here.
It might not have been used, but we
Yeah.
do have it on when I get my referral, I do have like parent contact, SEL team.
Yeah.
Discuss with student,
Yeah.
so. Cause sometimes the SEL team was like me and the social worker, instead of just me.
So Jen, are you recommending that we go back and ask the administration, in addition to the handbook, look at the actual policies that they're using for discipline as well? Is that something we should ask them to review in addition to just the
Yes.
handbook?
Yeah. I mean, in theory, there is only one district-wide.
Yeah,
I
I
was
don't
gonna
think
say,
so.
as long as
There's
they-
only one policy,
Yeah,
yeah.
and it's more the implementation of it, and
Okay.
like, and I
Right.
think, like.
And interpretation of it maybe, you know what I mean?
Right.
Interpretation.
Do we, oh, sorry.
Like you see it, like with the school committee gets a that's what the word biannually, bullying report, right? And you see it in the difference in the reports that come through from each middle school in the number of incidents that are reported, right? Like, and I refuse to believe that bullies only live in one half of our town. Like, it's just not possible. So I think it again comes into how the policies are implemented, how the staff is handling them, and just awareness on, you know, how we're treating these incidents.
Okay.
This is a question, just because I don't know the answer. So if there's, in theory, one district-wide policy, and then each different school, their own administration team, then decides and interprets how to train their own staff on it. Okay.
I have a question on the data, so often, well, more times than not, if I have a student, I have like 3 different things. I'll discuss with the student, refer to the SEL team, and a parent contact. So is this like the first thing maybe that came up on Aspen? Because usually it's multiple actions taken.
I don't know the answer to that, because
Okay.
I don't know how they
Extracted that.
extracted it.
So just know that, that's kind of a caveat to this, because, you know, for me, I don't know, you know, any other school, it's not just one, they may get time away from the classroom and refer to SEL.
Right.
It's not.
And that's kind of why, like, does this show all 3
Yeah.
of those things for the same student, right?
Right.
And so
Right,
that's why
yeah.
I got that ID number. And that was one of the things, like, I had this data before, we all did, like, at the end of the summer, because we had an APRA that had came in, and so we'd gotten the data, and I wanted to see it. But one of the things that had stood out to me, and I had talked to the superintendent about it, like, if you look at the preschool level and the elementary school level, you will see physical assault listed for elementary school students, right? And so, and I had talked, and the reason for that is because any physical touching is listed as assault. And so, like, is there a way, like, that maybe, cause is rides selections, are those the appropriate grades? Because, like, is it really assault if, like, is that assault, right? Like, or is it really like
You could have
assault?
100 assaults a day if you go to preschool.
What's that?
You could have hundreds of assaults a day if you
There
just go to
are,
preschool.
if you look at the data, you see like a lot of assaults, and so.
I wouldn't, as an elementary principal, put that down as assault. Assault is assault, like if I get 2 kids actually fist fighting.
Right.
To me, that's a level of assault, and then there's the teaching component of keeping the hands, I mean, it's elementary, safe hands, safe body.
Right, and so that comes down to like education and awareness of how to record things in Aspen, because if you look at like, I'm trying to find the thing here, if you look at the number of assaults that are being recorded at the elementary, especially at Fishing Cove, it's eye-opening, and so that goes to, like you said, Carolyn, like how is each school interpreting these things?
Yeah, because it's labeled assault, but then the follow-up is a phone or email. So you're like, oh.
Right, right.
I noticed that, and it's like, yeah.
So it's,
Yeah. And I had asked Ken about that, because I was like, what's happening in our elementary schools? And he said technically anything that is like a physical contact has to be recorded as an
They're
assault.
using the literal legal
The literal,
definition
right.
of
Yeah.
assault, which is any physical touch.
Yeah, and then if you look,
An
some of the
unwanted
assault, like if the
physical
assault
touch.
then leads to suspension, you're
Right,
back probably an actual assault.
so you have lots
Rachel,
of
you
stuff
had
to
something,
unpack in
you
here.
were gonna say something?
I just have to wonder, with the discrepancy between the middle schools, whether or not there's like this, I've seen it before where there's a chart. This happens equals this. This happens
A matrix.
equals this.
Like a
Some
matrix
type of
chart.
matrix chart, and I'm wondering if that has been created, but maybe one school is adhering to it more stringently than another or something like that. I don't know, it's just a thought I had, that could potentially be why you see different data and one more.
There's also been a building leadership change at Whitford Middle because that principal is newer than the DMS.
But this is like not like in the past year, this is like
Okay.
going back, like
Yeah,
going
this is
back
years, yeah.
continually.
For a length
Yes,
of time.
yeah.
But I wonder if the newer principal at Whitford Middle just maybe that hasn't been on their plate to cover that yet, or something, or maybe they just haven't had the opportunity to
Right.
get their hands around it completely. And they just kind of picked up where it was left
Where it
off.
was
and
left off.
So maybe that could be,
I would say I don't
Something
think
No,
there's
I
as
use
many
that for
issues.
catch-all.
Yeah.
Because if I'm gonna do teaching around something inappropriate, I
So,
Okay.
we have to look at development, what's developmental appropriate, and you have
I'm
to-
just looking at the data, and is it,
Yep.
is it
Yeah.
accurate that in this
Yeah.
entire
Yes.
3,800
Well, it's different. So-
thing, Forest Park
Right,
only
yeah,
had
it's in
three?
here.
I mean, we tell the kids.
You asked the same question I did, let me pull up, cause I looked at that too, and also like at a certain point, they all fell off. And the answer to that question was yes. And that was my other thing, I'm like, are we not recording things, or is like that
No.
population just like fabulous?
I think that's probably true. What is the date on this data, Jen?
It's last
Last school
school year.
year.
Last school, that would be accurate, it won't be accurate this year.
did everybody hear that?
No.
So his question was, is it true that, so this data covers all of last school year. Is it true that Forest Park only had 3 referrals for the whole of last school year? Because it just seems disproportionate
Their
compared to some of the
system,
other
you know, we
schools.
try and work together, yeah, I know Joe walking into a system that was happening, and, I know they were recording only suspensions on Aspen, so if it was a major and equal to suspension, it got recorded, but I think that since has changed.
Okay.
We've talked about it, yeah.
Yeah, I said no incidents noted for Forest Park since October. Is this a reporting error, or have there really been none? This report is accurate. We reran the report at the end of the school year. There was one additional incident that was recorded. The other thing, there was no incidents noted for Hamilton since October. Same thing, the report is accurate. So like I noticed the same thing. The other thing that I had pointed out after I looked at that was that 29% of all infractions center around attendance, and 51% are under the insubordination/disrespect. And I had said that, RIDE defines disorderly conduct as any act which substantially disrupts the orderly conduct of school function. And I wanted to know, like, where are all of these things, like, how are they being categorized? Because the bulk of these.
I don't wanna speak on middle school, but I know Barbara, they worked hard, and I wish we had middle school representation in coaching their teachers on where to put behaviors, and I think they felt like most of the things that were happening in the middle school fell under that category instead of having like assaults and and I think they were trying to streamline what was happening because teachers were, she's not here to speak on it, but I know she brought that up. They've done a lot of work on trying to, train teachers, and they were gonna have like 3 different buckets, things really going most of the time, unless you have a one-off, like a weapon or something,
Right, yeah, cause those kind of seem to be like,
And Jen, what was the percentile you saw for insubordination?
51%.
51.
Yeah.
I wanna make sure I got that right.
And RIDE's definition was, what was it? Insubordination is refusing a directive of a teacher, administration, or other staff member. And so I wanted to know, like, what our definition was of that. And it just seems like we're not being, like, consistent across schools with how we're doing that. Oh yeah, and here it is. There are 70 reports of teacher or student assault in this, and per RIDE's definition, it's an actual intentional touching or striking of another student against his or her will. And of the 70 incidents, 28 of them are by kindergartners. So, according to RIDE, it's supposed to be a very serious incident. And I'm not sure that's quite really what those are, so I think we can tighten that up a little bit too. So maybe like those should be,
I mean, it could be. I had a kindergarten, she had to give teachers bruises multiple times, so they might, that one child might
he
have,
as much as said
right?
that they're
So,
not, so I
yeah.
think we need to kind of like,
I don't know.
yeah, cause I'm sure having,
Yeah.
I mean, for sure kindergarten.
You have one
Yes.
that can really,
Oh, yeah, they definitely can for sure,
Mm.
but,
as I look at Joe.
One's too little, so more fun.
I think this is good discussion.
would
I
call
think we
this
need
all.
to go to our admin team, you know, and if I need to do things different, I will, but I just, even in subordination, and I, you know, will unpack that with teachers and what it really is and what it looks like, and is it, you know, like, because the child can't, is it because of, you know, the place that the child came in? I just don't like that word, and that's a personal thing, and maybe I'm wrong.
no, I agree.
Right,
No,
no,
I-
you know,
I
what I mean, I
agree with
just
you,
don't,
Caroline.
so I don't think like, I think it's a strong word, when you know the child and you know the need to
Mhm.
put that down
Yeah.
here.
Cause it's so negative
Yeah,
and
it's
it,
So that's
it's
why
so
I like
negative.
inappropriate in elementary
Yeah.
more, cause you can do so much teaching around what's appropriate and not appropriate, expected and not expected.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's a willful, like, disobedience, right?
Yeah.
And
And I come from the lens, Joe's lens, is there ever really a willful disobeying? No, because there's a root cause for it,
Right.
but yes, what it looks like.
I think the right
But I
system
think middle
is a
school-
wee bit is antiquated to some degree.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, we have other coding issues with RIDE, because they haven't, it's not been updated. I think it needs to be a further discussion. I have a lot of concerns with insubordination. When a student puts their head down because they're overwhelmed, that's being called insubordinate, because they're not taking out their computer and immediately doing what the teacher asked them to do. That's not insubordination, I would not call it that. So a lot of the things I read that are being labeled insubordination, but probably because they don't have another
place to put it.
place to put it or a category, I would not constitute as insubordination, and that's at the middle school level.
Yeah, so I do think, you know, I wish my colleagues are here, and I said it last time, I do think it's on us administrators to look at how things are and then provide that feedback. We can go in and edit, so if Rachel sends something to me and I'm like, oh, that's not really insubordination, I can go in and change it and then have that conversation with Rachel. So we are the overseers and we have the ones to post it, so I think we need to make sure that we are posting it and then teaching the teachers. Because people aren't doing it ill-intended, you know, well, some people do get upset, heads down, or, you know, that's a trigger for me too, because, you know, maybe I'm head down because I didn't sleep last night, like, I don't know, you gotta use, but RIDE is very punitive in the way they want you
It's
to,
not very restorative.
Right.
it's not restored, it's
No.
not the direction we wanna go in, really,
Right.
but we have to be accountable to them.
And maybe that's a discussion to have too, like, right, I know that's like pushing sand uphill or whatever the expression is. The other thing I noticed is that, and we all know that there is an issue in this district with students using racial and other discriminatory slurs. There's very, very few instances of that being documented in here, and RIDE does have a drop down for hate speech. So I find that very interesting as well, that those are not being recorded in here.
I do a lot of teaching around that, because it happens,
But like
It's
everybody
not
will
daily.
say, it's not an issue, and if you look on paper, it's not an issue. Because it's not
oh, it's an
being-
issue,
yeah,
it's an issue.
right, but it's not being documented, so I.
Cause it's a
wonder-
slip of a tongue and it's happening, I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily hate because it's a slip of the tongue and how they're talking, interacting with each other. So it's just like,
Yeah.
it's not allowed, the minute you step on the school bus and that's an extension of school, it's not allowed, right? Like I can't tell what's allowed at home, that's not on me. Right here,
Also, sometimes it's like friends joking around and sometimes it's like actual bullying. And it's hard to like, I know it's hard for like teachers to like figure out the difference a lot of the time, so.
that's why it just shouldn't be allowed.
At the high school, I literally witnessed like the use, like in weird spots that is, it can't be anything other than bad.
Yeah.
Like, cause like it's literally like in an area where a student like would try to use their cell phone or something and it'll be like on a space that like students kinda go to do something and it's like, and I'm like, okay, like we have to
Do you
get.
mean like a physical space in the building or like a forum?
No, it's like a windowsill, like in the
Yeah, yeah,
outside,
okay.
you
Yeah,
you know,
that's
they
what I was
prop
thinking.
open the window to vape or to like use a cell phone, and the word is right there, and then there's like a little saying with it that's pretty
Oh.
bad. And like I'll contact the administration and they'll remove it, and then it's back, you know, so, you know,
Say like graffiti.
yeah,
Mhm.
and it's pretty bad. Like I literally like, you know, took pictures of it, sent it to the administration. I was pretty upset.
Was this recent, Andrew?
It's happened, like it's like the same spots. And then the porta potty near the football stadium, I was running one day, so I used that, and the whole door was covered with it, which I was pretty upset about too. So it definitely exists, is what I'm saying.
Oh, I know it exists.
Like, it
But-
definitely
But I
exists.
guess my point was like, when you say that these things happen, people point to the fact that it's not documented,
Yeah.
to say that
Mhm,
there's no
mhm.
record of it. And,
Yeah.
and my point is that RIDE actually has a code for it, and none of the discipline things that happen with it are coded that way. So even like if you look at the actual things where the N-word is being used, it's not coded as hate speech. So I question that, like, so if we're going to address a problem, we have to name it, right? And if we're not naming it in these things.
I also don't know where I would put that in to Aspen, you know, like I
Well,
took
there's a drop down for
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, so
but
like.
it's not associated with the student, it's associated with the
Right,
building.
that is
So
different,
that's
yeah,
why I don't,
yeah.
I didn't know, like I just took pictures of it
Oh, yeah.
and sent it to the
Right, right.
administration to
So
fix.
I can see that if you would play this out, if you were to catch the person who wrote that, I could see it going up as vandalism.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or
I
if
never
it
caught anyone
said that
doing
it might
it.
go, it might be entered as disrespect, if you heard it
Yeah.
saying to another one, it might go under as disrespectful or language,
Yeah.
insubordinate language,
Yeah.
as opposed to a hate speech.
Yeah.
Cause I've never caught a student, so I've never gotten to that
Right.
place of a conduct referral, I just referred to like get it taken down and fixed. Cause I've never seen anyone remotely near there, and the people who were near there when I went there, they definitely didn't write it.
Mhm.
So we do a lot of teaching around that with Sue and Beth as psychologists and social worker, we'll even do circle up groups and say how we feel. But if it were to continue, then it would get logged, right? But if we do the teaching, again, just like everything else,
Mhm.
teaching around it. If it's the first time they're being taught it, I'm not going to label it
No,
hate
yeah.
speech. Just, give everybody a benefit of the doubt. And once you know you've taught it and we've worked on it, then it's like, all right, and now it's on them,
Yeah, the second time is a reminder, hey, don't you
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
we
like,
talked about
yeah,
this
yeah,
last,
yeah.
last time? And then, oh yeah, then it doesn't happen again, you're like,
Mhm.
it worked. Happens 3 and 4 and 5, well now, what are you not getting?
Mhm.
Right. And I think some of it, it just goes to how different schools implement it, different, like we were talking about, they implement things different, their interpretation is a little different of how they label things in Aspen or how they approach things. So, and I think that's something that we should look at some point to try to sort of standardize that process maybe, to make it equal among the schools about how, or at least somehow educate the building administration on how things should be properly documented in the system, so we have consistency and so we can really tell, is this improving or is it not? And so that may be,
So like,
More
almost like
records
an
for the future.
interreader reliability, where you get a case study and how would you document this?
right,
Mm.
yeah. Anyone else with any questions about data? I know we just kinda got this and you guys just really got it, so we need to have more time
Beaver
to
matrix though.
to look at it. But we can continue to look at this and kind of dig through it and see if there's anything else that really stands out to people. And then at the next
I mean, I think at the last, I love the data, Jen, so, like, yeah, it's therapeutic for me, and looking at any type of data, but, I think we did establish last time that we know we're not consistent with any
Right.
of this stuff, and that's why we're here and the need to get more consistent, and keep looking at Rachel and Joe, because at our admin council, no, but it is, we often say that we want time to be able to discuss and even do case studies among administrators, how would you do this, how would you do that? I think we need more time for that type of stuff.
Yeah, so in theory, if you had, like if you were to somehow create this, and it's virtually impossible, but if you think of every incident that happens, but at any of the 5 elementary schools, or the 2 middle and the high, if you had one person making the decision, every time on what the income and outcome was, but you don't. You have 9 different administrators, plus multiple deans and multiple vice principals, handling each, probably a little bit different, right, because we're all different. Unless you had one person who can funnel that down and be like, okay, you're the 7th person that came to me with this situation, you're gonna get the same treatment. Unless that happens, you'll never really get every school, because you're gonna have every administrator or every teacher. First off, let's think about it, how it happens in the classroom.
It starts from there.
Hence going around to the safety care talks, like how we're handling it in that moment dictates where this can go. I mean, I wrote up read a referral, because I do read them. Teacher wrote a kid up, 5th grade, for turning off the lights in the classroom. And twitching, because, but that got into Aspen. Like, so instead of saying, go turn the lights back on, that person took the time to put it in Aspen, so then that gets generated, and now an administrator has to go field this, and then somehow handle it, whether it talked to the student or, obviously the proverbial suspension, whatever the case is, that got generated. So one person makes the decision to put that in and write a kid up for a 5th grader for turning the lights off, as opposed to just go turn the lights on, or why did you do that? But that's what I'm saying. It starts at that basic of a level.
So at URI, part of my job is I read every single write-up in the residence halls for anything from anything, right? We're in Madrid College campus, and then any type of sexual assault, sexual misconduct. And so I spend at least an hour a day reading reports every day. And all those reports are generated from different hall staff. So we have, 10 plus dorms. And it is interesting, and we struggled, and I've, been in this position for 5 years, I've been at URI for 10, we really struggled with, we would break things down by looking at this residence hall or this residence hall, and why did we have 800 alcohol violations this year in this place and 20 in this. And what we found was a lot of it had to do with trying to find the time for us to be able to train the staff, and when they came back, of how to record incident, because we had a lot of issues with how do we record incident, how do we make sure we're using the same tags, we call them tags, but the same tags in our system, because what was happening was we weren't ever able to get a full grasp on what was really going on in the residence halls, because it was so different. And so what we had to do was implement, before, we do August training, we do January training, and then we do case consults, but the biggest barrier, and I imagine it's even a harder barrier for you all, is the time to do that, and then having the coverage, because we don't need to find coverage for adults. So we're able to step out and have meetings during the day, that last 2 hours, where we are incident reviewing major incidents. And I imagine in the school setting, it's really hard to have that time. And so I think even looking at, does this committee look at, how do we carve out the time for administration to be able to have that, right? Or
I think you have to look at what the priorities are.
Yeah.
Is that a priority? I personal opinion is I have the issue that every incident's put into Aspen. I've not seen that in other places of what, and I'm not exactly sure. It's almost being used as a behavior management system, a data collection system, and I don't believe that's the original intent, so I think that's also why you're getting some of these discrepancies, because it's not really intended to do that. I would like to see different ways, like branching lines of
Well, can I
elementary,
say
things like that.
historically, before you, let me coming into quid,
Yeah.
clearly, if you can see, I'm not that traditional punitive. But when we try and get a child support, the first thing would be, well, I don't see any discipline referrals. No, but I got all these interventions and showing, we have documentation, and it's just not in there. So now we are documenting more, but we also have our minor form.
What I was saying is that it's not the right system, in my opinion, to
Yeah.
collect that data. We should be using things like
Branching
branching
lines.
lines or something else to collect that data, and not Aspen, because it's not really intended to do that, and it's not restorative, and it doesn't give you other options, because it's not meant for that. So it's not meant to do that, and we're using a system in a way it wasn't. And I can appreciate that they asked for data, because I might push you for data too. You want a placement at a district, where's the data, where's the
Yeah.
interventions, what have
Right.
you done, you know, would be definitely be a question. That doesn't happen, by the way, most of the time
Well, by the time you get there,
it's
you
very
are
different, we
covered.
already part of that,
But
yeah.
you're getting,
yeah.
kid came into my classroom, put his head down as a conduct referral, he
Right,
has 28 of those.
right.
I also feel like
It's just doesn't seem
it
right.
escalates, like the verbiage and everything, and the format and the platform escalates everything, and it also muddles it with academics.
Yes.
So then,
I
like,
That's what it was put for, and it was supposed to, I always thought, like, as a parent, it was a academic thing,
that's what I
right?
mean, like, so, and then I've always argued about Aspen used that way, because then there's no record of things that are not serious behaviorally, but serious academically, where they could actually get help with that, like, not like a punishment system, but just be like, you know, Andrew never has his Chromebook and it's always dead, like, so he can't learn during class, like, and there's no place for that, so, and then now it's historically a place where serious behaviors go to get
Right,
recorded.
I mean, I've worked in schools where teachers would write up conduct referrals because kids didn't hand in their homework.
That's what I mean, like, that's
And then you get to
exactly
the
what I'm
end of the
talking
year in a
about.
school, and this is not this district, but,
Yeah,
wow, we had 8,000 referrals this year, and wondering why we're
yeah,
all spinning out of control, like that homework or the kid, academically, we should have that log, right? Very different from the conduct referral.
cause like, I wanted like conduct not recorded to like punish, but to record like, let's get this kid some help. He's
Yeah.
Or effort on your
He's
part.
never able to like participate in class, so, you know, we need to have that discussion.
Yeah.
And where does that go?
Right, where do you log, I guess it's more of a logging
More
piece
of
and
a log.
documentation.
And then like, to every teacher to know that, because like if Andrew needs to charge his Chromebook every period, then that means I'm purposefully not charging my Chromebook so I can leave class and go to the media center, versus like, if it's just happening occasionally with one teacher, that's more organic, you know? So I always disliked that platform
Agree.
for the combination, and even like all the terms are like so serious, it's like, you know, a child's, you know, cutting a class, they're not committing a crime, you know what I mean? It's like, why are you taking it so serious?
Rachel, can you explain what branching minds is?
Oh, someone's waving out there.
No?
Do we let them in? Branching
Can't
Minds
even
is
see them.
elementary right now,
Yep.
and it is a
A database.
MTSS, multi-tiered support system, management system for academics and behavior. And we're starting to utilize that more and more. People are getting trained, we have another training on Monday about how to use that to collect that data in order to develop interventions. Because there's also a trend here, and again, I have no problem saying this because I've said it multiple times in other venues, which is there's a real trend to admire the problem. Oh, let's sit around a table and admire the problem. Oh, look at that, the data's really bad. Not talking about this data, I'm talking about like the kid. Oh, the kid is really struggling. Move on to the next kid. And there's a lack of planning in many places. I think Quid is exceptional for not doing that. DA doesn't do that either. But in general, you see that as a pattern of a lot of sitting around admiring the problem and not really putting an intervention in place. There's also an issue of siloing here, where if there's an intervention being put in place, let's say it's just a tier 2, everyone is looking towards the social worker and the school psychologist to provide an intervention when there hasn't been anything done in the regular classroom, an additional piece within that. There's not been other pieces. It's like, oh, this is a problem, it's looking for someone else to kind of do it. In many cases, not everywhere, and I'm making a global district-wide view, that's my view. That's more so elementary and middle, that kind of thing that happens.
So my wonder is, Aspen, I mean, I always think of safety first. If it's a safety issue, that's a non-negotiable and that goes in there. Think, going back to what Rachel said, like everything being in there, and or I have a student who is an everyday offender, and really, it's good data, right? It's good data to show what that child is doing every day, so some of it is individual, but I'm just wondering, as a district, if we look at safety as a threshold, and emotional safety goes along with that, which is where the hate crimes and other things would go under that, emotional safety, physical safety, I don't know.
And then use that, another type of platform that's more appropriate for
Like
like
another
intervention,
tool,
yeah.
another
Right,
tool.
mine's to be
Yeah, I
another
think
tool.
two tools
And
for
I have
sure.
to tell you, the data, I'll put my special ed, student service hat on. It does not help me in designing functional behavior assessment, the Aspen data does not help me in designing really an intervention. It can give you an overall thought. We've reviewed them together in some cases. They're not helpful because they're skewed. And you don't know if they're skewed positively or they're skewed the other way. You don't really know. You can't really gauge the level of seriousness or
Okay.
egregiousness it is, because you have the putting the head down on the table and the I turned off the lights, and then you have this other thing also being called insubordination that may or may not be. It's really not a good,
And
not a
the
good
other
way
thing
for us to
too about
analyze.
Aspen, it's a very archaic platform,
Absolutely.
like Windows 98, so like I tried to MacGyver it and put in like notes of like de-escalation and good terminology. No one even saw it because they would, you have to like
We have
click
to go
on it
into it.
and then click on it and then click on this little pen to even see it. So nobody does that. So it's really not even MacGyverable into a nice area. Like it just doesn't work.
No.
So I hear a couple things. I hear that Aspen by itself is not like a good
Appropriate.
platform for behavior related
Reporting.
types of things, right? That's something else that we need here. I hear that like the language that we're using around behavior is punitive and not the way that we want to look at it, and that our policy is probably not being put into practice the way that we wanna do it. I'm hearing that we agree that the numbers that we're seeing are, regardless of like the data going in, like, or the way it's going in, are not good. So I think regardless of how we fix the system, we agree that like, we also need to fix how it's being implemented, like the practices. So what's a step, because I think we need to like come up with, like,
Action
Like
steps.
That goes,
an
yeah,
action,
right to the next.
right?
Like, what is
The
the
next
next
agenda.
step?
What's the
I
next
was,
step?
yeah, I was just gonna
I'm
say,
wondering
it's
if
5:21,
I
so we
wonder if it's
don't wanna be respectful
vocabulary.
of everyone's
Sorry.
time.
I just wanna, I don't wanna keep us backwards, but I wanna like add a thought, just devil's advocate, and then next steps, I agree. So to start, I agree with everything that I'm hearing, and it's like, how do we manage this? My only pushback is, and this is maybe like a high school perspective, cause just the sheer volume of information that comes through a system, it's like, when I hear, well, let's get another system, I'm like, cause it's like, we just, the Canvas and Aspen debacle, and it's, so, I guess I'm just iterating that, like, is more the answer, or is a better system, SIS system the answer? I don't know what the answer is, but I know like at our level, when it's 1,300 students you're managing, and it's like then you get in front of the parents and you have to say, all right, I need to give the attendance data, the discipline data, the general information data, the MTSS data, the this data, it's like, now we're pulling from all these
I can tell you, if Branch of Minds
platforms.
goes up to the high school,
We did start,
the thing with
Jody
Branch-
brought us in,
Branch of Minds, it's everything in one-stop shop.
which is the
We're
most
building it,
glorious thing
so you would
I have
only
seen.
have.
So that's my only
that
2 cents.
Yeah, my
Just like-
big
I
two
don't know if it
cents
goes
that
A
I
one-stop
mention
shop.
all the
Yeah,
time about
eventually, I think.
behavior.
is this district has historically not
Not good.
piloted anything. We jump in and then it doesn't really work like we say.
Yeah.
So
And
I
then you're
mean,
stuck with a
I would
platform.
love to like approach a vendor of a product of like, hey, we want a limited license for maybe one school and we'll try it before we jump in all the way, because
Kinda like what
I
they're doing with
research
Branching Minds.
That is what we're
programs.
doing.
Yeah.
I research programs, I know that that is on the table, that when you're offering a big school contract, you can get like a, probationary pilot, and we don't seem to do that with anything. We seem to like, just dive in, and then it's all like in theory, and then when you practice it, like I literally vented this yesterday, like I was in the theory, I was on the committee, we like thought about everything, it was awesome. And then when you went and taught it in the classroom, it was horrible. And that's what I worry about, like what Jacqueline said, is like, we like, oh, it's such a great idea. And then you go to use it and like you still have to keep Aspen because there's some element of Aspen
Yeah.
that still has to stay there
Yeah.
because we didn't think about that when we piloted it. So now you have 3 programs, you know what I mean? Cause it doesn't meet the needs, and of course the vendor sold you that it meets all the needs, but then it doesn't, like it
So-
meets the needs with like the elementary school but not the high school, you know what I mean,
Yeah,
something
and
like
Branch
that.
of Minds may not meet your needs, but it will meet, and we only are doing elementary for that very reason.
Yeah.
We wanna see how it works before that. It is being used in other other places very successfully. But I don't think, my opinion is you're not gonna find an SSI's student management system and an MTS system that work together.
Yeah.
What they've done with Aspen is retrofitted all these different types of modules. Even the
Yeah.
special ed IEP
It's clunky.
module is not great.
It's very clunky.
It's meant to manage your data and to do your grades and transcripts. It's not really meant, it wasn't originally designed to do all these things. They've gone in and added
Yeah.
additional modules, the IEP module, the 504 module, the behavior, they've added all these things kind of afterwards, but not from the internal design.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I don't know of any integrated system that has both this really good MTSS stuff like Branching Minds has, as well as like the student management stuff that you also need. So I agree, it's nice to have one system, but then will that also start to muddle again? Or should we be keeping our MTSS kind of data here
Yeah.
and our behavioral, like egregious and
Safety or
transcripts and
whatever.
grades here? That's what I would see,
And
but
it's also a nuance of like, you know, you'll suffer the slings and arrows of that what you already know. Like somebody like Aspen might be the main problem, that it won't like work well with another separate system, but we won't get rid of Aspen because we have so much invested. That happens too all the time, and you're sitting there like, we're paying top dollar for this program that my fantasy football site does a better job, and you're like, it's because everybody's like locked into it. Like that's what you literally sit there like, okay, I'm on a fantasy football site that's easier to use than Aspen, but guess we have to keep it. You know what I mean? Like,
Try having a district without Aspen, and you're like, oh my god, I miss Aspen. I want
Yeah.
one spot that does grades, that does the, look up the kid's phone number, look up
yeah.
just what you need and having it in one spot, but I do think it doesn't offer any linearity, like you, with the Branching Minds, you can kind of tailor another column that you wanna keep track
you can
of,
do your own thing.
and as opposed to,
You can't do your own thing in Aspen unless you're gonna pay significant amount of money in order to
Exactly.
customize it.
And that's another
Yeah.
thing, they always have the add-ons, you know, and you're like,
It's
okay.
incredibly expensive. If I just wanted to add like one additional page in the IP module, it's something like $3,000.
Exactly.
But they do work
but you kind of, look, the workaround is finding the documents tab and putting stuff in
correct.
Right.
So we have workarounds for that, but we also have an Aspen user group for at least a special ed group where we sit down and say, since there is no district statewide paperwork, other states have statewide paperwork, Rhode Island does not. We create we create it, the 16 of us, and say, this is our state paperwork, and so then it gets submitted to Aspen.
Hmm.
But it's limited. Anyways,
So we have, I wanna be respectful of everyone's time, so we have about 3 or 4 minutes left technically in our time here. We can
Let's
go
do
over a
action.
little bit maybe, but I don't wanna keep everyone too late. Especially our students, you know, cause I know you guys got homework and things to do too. So let's go back into the develop the action plan and goals and things like that we heard. So, I mean, if you look at the goals and kind of the charge for the creation of this group, it's, you know, recommend training and things of that. So that's, I think that's things that we need to start looking at, to, you know, equity-focused professional discipline training. Is this something, you know, do we need to talk to our new DEI person for the district and involve her in these
She's right
discussions?
there.
Sally.
Oh, there you are. Hi. I have not met you yet. So,
I have an action
Ta-da!
plan step, because I think when you're talking about equity, PD and all those things, those are really broad and
Yeah.
big. But I'm wondering if we couldn't start with looking at the RIDE definitions of things and looking at how we're defining things and just simply start with the vocabulary. To me, that feels manageable.
Right, put definitions down.
Yeah,
I
like
said
take a
just
look at the
stop.
vocabulary and
Stop with the
definition
small.
and start getting a better a
Okay.
common understanding of that.
I'm gonna, Sally's
do you
gonna be
think?
like, oh shit, here she goes again. I think, no, our purpose is to try to do something to substantially improve the disproportionality that's happening. And definitions are great, but that's not gonna move the needle on what's happening in the district. Like, I think we need to we can do that and like, but we can't move the needle on RIDE, like, but we can take steps to
No,
affect.
I'm
No,
not
we
saying
have to
about- no, I think
understand the
you
definitions, so we have a
misunderstand.
common understanding, cause our practices
Otherwise,
won't
what
get
are we
common
training
unless
on?
we know
I'm not advocating for training right now, like,
Okay.
I'm advocating for.
Cause what else would we train? I mean, like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you need something of substantial.
Yeah, I'm advocating for, like, doing something more, like, I think, number one, I think the biggest thing that we need to do, cause a big push right now in the district is student voice, like, and that was one of the biggest things, was soliciting student input on what's happening in the district, and we've done nothing on that so far, so that would be, in my opinion, like, the number one thing that we should be doing. And like, after that, like, cause this committee is done in February, like, we're temporary, so, I don't want to, and I don't wanna mean waste time on definitions, but like, I think we need to start moving things up to the school committee that they can act on.
I'm gonna push back, Jen, because here's the thing is, what are you gonna act on? If we don't have a common understanding, you could do, just like we do safety care training, right? And we go to every district and talk about safety care training, but it's very global. And if we don't have something to train on to say, okay, this is the common language, this is how we're gonna define it, this is what the behaviors look like, in order to be, and have equitable practices on top of that, what are we training on? We're gonna do more global training that actually does not move the needle at all.
But
Do you see what I'm saying?
I do, but we
Okay.
can say too, cause you're gonna have to go from here, you're gonna have to go to the school committee, they're gonna have to approve it. We can say, this committee would like to ask for funding so that we can do training. This committee would like to ask for approval so that we can do like a train the trainer, like things like, you know, you said, like Joe, you said like have, whatever you said about having like a, you said it first, like, what did you say, like a case study, right? Like, you know, models like that, like things like that to like start having conversations in that area. Like, I don't want to, I'm not gonna use the word waste, but I don't wanna spend 2 meetings talking about definitions and then find ourselves, our next meeting's December, our next meeting's in January, and then we're done in February. So I wanna make sure that we get something moved up to the school committee, because we don't have the authority to act here.
So could it be then,
Maybe we need to agree on what we wanna move up to the school committee.
that's what I'm wondering,
We
I wonder if
absolutely
we
have
could
to, like,
say,
bigger-
that's what I'm saying,
What
like,
that would
maybe we
fit
could
under.
say that we would like, funding to have teachers and students, or students, get together to determine the vocabulary and definitions and things like that. I don't.
I have a suggestion on what we could work on.
Perfect.
I think for, like, not, like, we could talk about this next meeting, but like for now, I don't think we should focus on like the adult side of things, and we should focus on like, if we wanna get like additional student input, we should like at the beginning of the like this committee, I like mentioned like bullying discipline and stuff, and like how it's like unfair, and like how we can like help with that, and because bullying is a big issue, and that's kind of more like student focused.
Mhm.
I think we should maybe like talk about that and how we can like help with that.
I don't think we can do that without looking at what the adults are doing with the students, cause that's where the breakdown is.
So I have like a thought on that, cause I
Right,
agree with
right,
what
like
you're
it's how
saying,
we,
but
how the adults are responding or understanding it themselves is what's going to support.
Can I
Student
clarify,
voice.
Julia, is it underreporting, overreporting, or just how it's being addressed?
All three.
Okay.
and that's kinda, I was.
Adult practices matter, you know?
Yeah,
and
I'm not
you-
saying like we
No,
should
no,
totally
no,
not,
but, no, but we can't have change for you unless we change as adults.
I know.
So my thought is like we have an anonymous bullying reporting site, right? And so my question to hearing that is, do the students know it's there? Do they know what their resources are? Do they know who to go to in the building? Do you know what I'm saying? It's like,
Julia, is
what
that
do we
kinda
already
what you're
have?
heading at?
What is the education on that for our students? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or what comfort level do they have in coming forward with some of those concerns, and if not, why, and how can we address that as
I
like
think,
teaming with you?
yeah, what I was talking about at the beginning of the school year is just like, it doesn't, cause there's a lot of not a lot, but like instances where like bullying occurred and it wasn't like handled correctly, or like there wasn't enough discipline towards the students that like the bully themselves, and so students felt discouraged by that, and they didn't want to like talk about it as much, and so
Cause they felt like nothing was gonna be done.
yeah, exactly, and that's like the main issue, I feel like. So just like communication and like how we can help with that, and like how we can like set up more policies so that it feels fair
So if I hear what you're saying correctly, is like, students know that the forms exist,
Yeah.
students know that there's a policy, and they know that there's a practice, but based on past incidences,
Yeah.
why bother?
Yeah, literally, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So that's just something that I think would help a lot.
So maybe with things like having conversations and communications about, look, we know things weren't handled well in the past, we get that, but we're trying to change.
Yeah.
What would help you all feel comfortable and safe coming forward?
Yeah,
Those types of things?
kind of like that.
Okay.
Okay.
And on
I
the
think
other
I
end,
captured that, I wanna
Yeah.
make sure I got that.
It's having the
Sorry to
adults
put
learn how
you-
to validate,
Yeah.
which then could be the two-tier, you need
Student
funding for
empowerment is
student,
what
yeah.
I'm hearing, empower students' voice.
Yep.
And, you know, I thank you for being here because it's starting with you, but like, what else can you do at the high school level to,
The thing I think I have, I always am yes-anding, just to be clear. Like, I'm certainly not saying, I agree with everything you're saying.
I understand.
I'm currently not a disciplinarian in your school, but previously when I was, spaces that I would have a difficult time in, and I know our deans experience this, and so maybe we address this conversation too, is there are certain things that we actually can't address. And so I have a tough time with words or phrases like aren't doing a good job of, because for example, this used to drive me crazy. Things could happen after school hours, for example, let's say through text or Snapchat or social media. You experience it in a way that we never have, right? And it's awful. And I was told, you know, like legally or through the school, you know, there's not anything that we can formally discipline through the school of something that happened outside of the school. However,
Yeah.
my heart was bleeding because I
Yeah.
felt helpless.
Yeah.
So it's like, what, I don't know what the answer is, but I do know, you know, there are roadblocks in some instances where certainly the students are gonna feel like, well, that wasn't done fairly. But like, then the hands were tied of those who were giving the discipline, because then you have the families of those who were disciplined that you need to answer to, well, like, where's your evidence, or where were the, so it's, I wonder how we can, how do we move forward with the times? Because right now, I think our policies and our procedures are so, here's what happened in school, and then everybody went home, but it's just so messy now.
Yeah.
I'm just using that as an example
Yeah.
because it was so, do you know what I mean?
Yes, but I also know just from like being in the school with the kids and like going into some of these clubs and speaking to them, like, and I don't wanna speak for Julia, but I
Yeah.
have heard students tell me that they have heard teachers use these slurs in the classroom.
Well, that's disgraceful.
And so,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I
yeah, that's
heard
disgraceful.
students
Sure.
go to teachers and have had teachers say things like, whatever, like, we're not, like, literally tell them, like, discourage them from reporting things. So it's not.
And that's a problem, yeah,
And
it's
these
totally.
are the types of problems,
Yep.
so why would students
Sure.
then
Of course.
feel comfortable?
I
So
feel that we're trusting.
it's it, right,
There's
so-
like there's buckets here.
But I'm sure that they know which teachers they can go to and are going to do.
Right, but I think that our students understand that, like, those types of things, like, you know, if
Mhm.
something happens that off school or,
Mm.
but when you are literally sitting in a classroom,
All right.
that's very difficult then to feel that you're in a safe environment. Am I correct, Julia?
Yeah.
So,
Um,
those are the types of things I think we need to
Mhm.
address,
Mm-hmm.
so.
So what are steps we can take to do that?
Well, I think soliciting like this type of
Yeah.
feedback from students, like, what do you need to feel?
So I know, we had talked about the survey that the high school does and possibly adding questions to that. Did you
Yeah, I
look into
did bring
that?
it back, and they're just not the same. The data would get really messy because the connection survey is more about like, is there an adult in the building you feel safe with, an adult outside of the building, and then the process by which our school social worker and school psychologist kind of follow up with that is not quite the same as like, how do the disciplinary practices make you feel? So I actually think we should propose, and it would have to get approved through, like, I'm not the Shivali and the administrative
Right.
team and all of that, but I think that if we propose something maybe separate from or different, it just isn't the same data being solicited, and so it was like an awkward addition. And their thought was it could muddy down both points, if that makes sense,
Okay.
which made sense to me. So I think that, I don't know if a function of this is if we wanna figure out what questions we wanna ask or what's important to ask, and then maybe we propose that to the high school or
with
district
a new
administration. Like a new survey,
Yeah.
something that is independent from,
Yeah.
cause I think they both deserve their space. You know, and SurveyWorks is like more general data that does ask some of this, but I think what we're trying to get at is, like you're saying, through student eyes.
The DEI committee is about to send out a brief survey regarding, like, race issues. I don't know if it makes sense to pair up the two.
Yeah.
Makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes
Yep.
sense.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
I will connect you with the students who are doing that. You probably know them, and maybe you two can put your heads together and tack on the questions, and then we can send them out together. Would that
Okay.
work?
That's good, yeah.
Okay, all right, perfect.
Do you think that we'll get a good response from that, Julia?
I don't know like all the perspectives of all the students in my high school because our high school's so big that I
Yeah.
could literally never meet some of these kids ever in my life, but they still go to the same school with me. So it's like there's a lot of different experiences, but I think overall, if they feel like their voice will get heard through answering honestly, then we'll get good answers.
Okay.
But it depends.
Yeah.
Well, that was my next, the vehicle, how does this get sent out to students? Is it
It's
email?
It's through.
or-
Yeah, you could do
Through
like a
Aspen.
Google survey.
Yeah.
Oh, through Aspen?
Yep.
like an Aspen email,
Yeah.
basically.
Snapchat.
Usually we
There's like a
we
there's
use like
extended
a,
advisory and
Yes,
you like
that's what I was
answer
gonna
it.
Send it to their email.
Yeah, and it gets sent to their email and they'll do it.
Okay.
It's like kind of mandatory, like they don't say it's mandatory, but like you're expected to do it. So.
Yeah, and it's like anonymous, so people can, it's optional and, you know,
And that just requires building approval, does that come?
no, it just requires building approval,
Just-
cause it's.
so
that's
Shivali
what my
and-
understanding,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
administrative
and
teams.
Shivali's in DEI, and we just had a discussion about this last night,
Okay.
so. I'll
So
connect
maybe
with
the
them.
really top agenda item for next meeting should be what are we sending to school committee for approval?
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yep.
And that's what we should
That's
focus
it.
our conversation
Boom.
on.
Yes.
I agree.
But this has been helpful to us to get perspective, I think.
I agree.
And I really appreciate you being here, Julie,
'Cause I'm
and
just
I
like-
appreciate you letting us ask you question after question, cause what we're really trying to do is just kind of like figure out what is like the
Yeah.
function, I'm always
Right.
looking for the function,
I
like what
like
is
that
going
you're
on.
asking questions,
Yeah.
but I'm just sitting here and I hear you talking about like Aspen and like whatever, and I
Yeah,
just like,
yeah,
I
okay.
can't, I don't feel like I can have any input, so that's why I brought it up, so I.
No,
No, I'm
Yeah.
glad you
Also,
did.
I think
Well, I
That's why
think-
you're here.
Stop
The
talking
other
about
question
Aspen.
I'm not saying what she says isn't important, I'm just trying to think, the purpose of this advisory was to, like, ways to reduce suspensions and look at our data and disproportionality, so it's at some point that we haven't addressed that. I think we're trying to get an understanding of what the data look like to then help how we do that, but
And I think that's where Rachel was going with, you know what, if we start with this, I think we need multiple things to be happening.
Right.
Cause if we start with, you can't, it's so important, this almost sounds like immediately important, because in my mind, no child should never be told not to report something, right? Like, that's so harmful.
Yeah, I mean,
That's like,
But that's our whole society, is you can go report something even to the police, and it still can go nowhere. So-
no, but you need to be able to report it, feel
Right.
comfortable to report it, right? But I'm just saying, that kids need to feel comfortable to have something. I'm not at the high school level, but I think the work with the adults is what's pivotal in the suspensions and yeah, we got off on a tangent on how and where.
So I have a question on
yeah.
the suspensions, and I have to look at the original audit, but I was working on his spreadsheet just now, and like at the high school last year, 80% were white students. Like of all of our suspensions, there was like roughly 240, 80% were white. And then the other populations, however, also we know the percentage just of the student body is totally disproportionate, right? So, I guess then, how did the original audit kind of like take those numbers and make those determinations? Cause I wanna, like, when I step away today, I wanna like sit down with that data and have the correct lens on it.
Well, I always, the question I had when I looked at this initially, this is a district-wide thing, but
Yeah,
your high school.
I was just looking at the high school.
But your
and
high
that one.
school
Yep,
makes sense, cause you're the entire district.
yep.
Each of our 5 elementary schools has a different demographic.
Oh, right,
On each,
You have,
on
you
each
have,
level.
yeah.
Right.
yeah,
Based
yeah.
on
Okay,
location,
right.
yeah.
Correct.
Right, and the audit shows that students of color in particular are at higher risk of suspension than their white peers, and
Mhm.
often their white peers are at lower risk.
And
And if they
reported
have,
instances.
if they're
not just
also
suspension.
eligible for special ed on top of
Mhm.
that,
Mhm.
double risk.
So how do we see that, like in this data that we brought today? How can I see like that, the more at-risk
You
piece?
have to usually calculate it,
Okay,
yeah.
You could kind of sort by drop downs and kind of like literally add and subtract how many, you could, like I said, when I looked at it, Forest Park has 3, and the high school should have the most, cause you're,
Yeah, so I
biggest-
did that today, and out of that, it was like 180 something were white students, and then 30 something were black students, 13 were Native American, and one was Asian.
And
So
then
I see the sheer numbers, but I'm also
There's an
thinking
average,
like,
right?
you compare it to
Relative
the
to-
population in the
You
school.
need the
got it,
demographics
okay.
of your
I'm like,
high
somebody tell me the
Yeah,
math
yeah,
behind what I need to do.
Yeah, and then you take the population in the
Yes,
school
and
you
compare that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, got it, thanks.
yeah.
I'm also,
It's the same way you would almost look at RICAS in a way, we're just looking
Yeah.
at discipline data and way, where the
Proportions.
proportionality of
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah.
Okay.
To this.
sometimes I have a thought where I'm like, we did this committee to reduce or stop like the disproportionate amount of like suspensions and like people of color and like other demographics are more at risk, and I'm like, so you want us to end systemic racism? Like, I don't know, that's like, I'm just thinking about that, so that just makes me feel like there's not a lot we can
Right.
do, because it's kind of that deep, and we can't, there's not a lot we can do it like, really like
We have to try.
intrinsically, like we can like try, but
We
it's
can
just
do it in
like,
North Kingston.
We can
Well-
work on our
Yeah.
system, that's
well,
what we
the-
can
the-
do.
the-
yeah.
I mean,
So
the-
It is definitely
the
overwhelming.
Hollis
just get
survey came out was
frustrated
really
sometimes
targeting
thinking
Good
about
point.
the
It's
point
very
of was
overwhelming.
was
You're not wrong,
suspensions,
you're not wrong.
cause that's your biggest outlier. That was that's the one I focus on. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, it hit
This is so
suspensions
deep rooted.
because that was,
A removal from school.
Right, and
Right.
then like a removal from the academic setting and blah,
Right.
blah, blah.
I think in-school suspensions were included as
Yes,
well.
any
Yeah.
suspension,
They do.
either, it doesn't matter, in or out.
They don't count, they count it as both for RIDE, unfortunately.
But
Doesn't matter.
How you end a lot of this discussion is don't suspend a kid.
Right, so,
That you just do that and all of a sudden this whole conversation goes away.
right,
Find an alternative motive to what it is and then you don't have to worry about it. It doesn't matter if they're black, white, or blue. That if your end result is to reduce suspensions, and to me, it just goes back to what got them suspended in the beginning. You know, what was well, this kid pushed another kid in preschool, so we're gonna suspend him. Okay,
Yeah.
that doesn't make sense. But if it's a fight in the high school, well, maybe that warrants a suspension, but,
Right.
you know, so,
yeah,
but how you end a lot of this whole conversation is just suspend less kids.
I would
My-
disagree with that a little bit. Like, I agree with you about the suspension part. I don't think kids should be being suspended and kept at the school. But I would also say the underlying behaviors which cause the disproportionality still exist, even if you're not suspending. They're just now showing up in lunch detentions and, you know, other disciplines, just not at the suspension level, because racism is underlying a lot of those.
that's true, but, I do think my recommendation would be an end product possibly for this committee would be a reformed or revised discipline matrix that favors restorative practices rather than
Yeah.
punitive
I thought that's-
practices.
We've been
Honestly,
talking
those
about
are
that.
the goals,
Yeah,
yeah. Like, we
yeah.
have about 5 goals that we're supposed
And
to be
they're-
accomplishing, and those are
Yeah.
some of them, but we set the
And we
word
brought
matrix,
some
'cause
to
Yeah,
the
Yeah, we
table.
I'm
just talk around
gathering
them a lot.
some examples of matrices that are more reformative, if you guys
Yeah,
would
we
like to take a
we
look
looked
at
at
those.
several
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah,
great if
that'd
you
be
wanna
great.
share
Yeah.
that.
Please
Yeah.
share
Share-
some.
share.
Please
Because
Send them to me and
there is
Rachel.
stuff
We'll
out
send
there
them
that we can kind of work
Steal.
off
I
of,
think
yeah,
we looked at
we don't have to
Chicago, a couple other
reinvent
places.
the wheel, yeah,
Yeah.
Send them to Rachel and I and we'll
Do you
send-
have
we'll
our,
just send
do you
them.
have a copy of the charge for this committee?
It's online.
okay,
Yeah,
I'll find
yeah,
it.
yeah,
It's online.
Yeah.
I mean, because it
I'm
and
so
ultimately,
sorry.
Jen,
No, no, no.
Jen, you're right,
so much.
okay, so we're not suspended, but they're still getting some sort of, unless it goes back to the adult practices, we change it, we're not doing the restorative piece. To that, you're not going to get a decrease in whatever incidents or behaviors that are being logged any other way. So you can't have, the hope is if we change our practices and that would naturally go down.
Yes, that's what,
Right, and I think
ultimately,
that has
is-
to
you're
happen
right, it's the
first.
adult practices
Yeah.
that have to
And-
change
Okay.
100%.
Yeah,
How
how
do
do
we
we make
train
sure
for
all
that
students
and-
feel
Which
safe?
is hard, yeah.
It's hard to get
Right.
And that ties into the conversation we had yesterday at DEI about like anti-racism training and implicit bias training and all of that stuff. We need professional development training, and it's just a whole huge, it's, you know.
It is huge,
Yeah.
and I think,
So I know,
It's huge.
I know you said you have examples and things like that. Jen shared with me, there was just a school, district on the Cape in Massachusetts that just implemented kind of a restorative justice program that we might wanna, I'm curious to see how they're implementing it, how they're, like, what they're doing
looks like.
to try, what it looks like for them, how they're getting started with this. So, I'm planning to reach out to somebody there to try to get some more information, like how is this going? I know you guys just started, you just passed it, and it was really, but it was student led.
It was student-led,
It was
yeah.
student led,
Oh,
it
wow.
didn't come from the adults.
Nice.
Most of the time restorative practices are meant to be student-led.
Right, right,
They do
so,
restorative
The
circles on their
practices
own. You
themselves,
model
yeah.
it and then they take it over. That is the model.
was it Barnstable?
But I think on
Is that
Matrix.
right?
I don't remember.
I'll
Yeah.
look into it again, but I wanna reach out to them and see if there's anything that they
I
can
feel like something
provide.
like that would be very helpful.
Yeah, if they told you it's going horrible, just pretend you didn't call them.
But there's other
I don't
places where
think it
this
will
is,
be. I
this
really
is in
don't.
place, not just
Yeah,
there.
there,
Because
yeah.
that whole model is about it being turned over to circles of kids
Right.
and not to the adults making the decisions.
Yeah, the adults just mediate the
They
conversation.
mediate, they don't make the decision.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
Even things like attendance go into that bucket, so
Mhm.
kids
Yes.
who are
Right.
chronically absent, and you create a
They-
circle, and, you know, it's about taking accountability, and it's, I mean, it could really have legs if we were to do it and do it right.
Right. The only reason with this one is just because they're in the beginning phases of it,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I'd be curious to find out,
Yeah.
How
like,
they
have they
roll
run into any roadblocks? How's it going? What's happening? And just to kind of follow up with them and get some more data. So I plan to reach out to them. to
And
see
I
if
do
there's
think
anything they
buy-in
can
from
bring back.
teachers, it could be different.
And that's part of it too, buy-in from the administration, buy-in from
Yeah, I
teachers,
think
buy-in from.
administration-
Well, I
It's gonna
say
be
especially
different.
probably at the secondary, I just feel like
Oh,
elementary's more.
Yeah.
I actually think you're gonna get, I think our biggest, I think you'll get buy-in at the high school.
Yeah,
Because they've talked about those. I think you might, struggle a little bit in middle school.
okay.
I'm just,
Do you have some? You have that look on your face?
I do, I'm trying to think, I always think restorative justice is what happens after
mhm.
something as opposed to how do we prevent or do a better job preventing it from happening to get to a rest. And that's, I guess that was my point, of not just removing suspensions, then this goes away, it's how do
Well,
we,
now you're getting into PBIS. and-
well, but that's more that's my lane,
Yeah.
right? So how do I get to a point where I can reduce the things that are happening in the classroom or in the hallway or in the cafeteria in each setting, in each school, so that it doesn't get to a write-up to then get to
But
Right.
I
restore.
think write-ups maybe shouldn't even be on the matrix, like continuum, or toward the far end of the continuum of consequences, right? The first consequence is a private conversation with the student. The second, depending on the infraction, if it's minor, the first practice would be the teacher and student have a private conversation. The second could be a call for home and the parent sits in on the conversation with the student. And the write-up happens on the third offense or something, you know what I mean? Where the write-up gets moved a little bit away from the first incident of my head was down on my desk, if, the more minor things.
Well, we use our minor form for that, and that's where I have my Google Doc, and that's where I really look at my data, because then you can look at the patterns and trends, and it also, so what things you just mentioned, or as I dropped on what teachers will have to say, what they did. Okay, first it was just a conversation with the child, no parent contact at this time, and it layers it, so I do think it needs to be reported and documented somewhere, and it's not for me to take action, it just,
Right,
I can look at it
yes, yeah.
globally to see what's going on.
Mhm.
So I think it needs to be documented, but also it goes back to training. Some people are just more equipped at not even de-escalating, stopping the escalation to begin with, right? It's.
I guess I'm a big person of like, if we can get to it before it even happens, it doesn't get to.
Doesn't get to.
Doesn't
the
even get
write-up.
to a conversation or a write-up or whatever that professionally goes down the line.
Yeah.
How we handle that in that moment,
You want prevention, not intervention.
it's not even
Exactly.
Takes so much more effort to intervene than just to prevent, so
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's how do you.
Which is
what-
why we're doing the Safety Cares Roadshow tonight to the parents. We're going to, Joe is gonna do a presentation to our Special Ed Advisory Committee parents.
so as
We
far as
didn't
acting,
do that you had such a
I,
great
well, I was
response.
worried, people told me that they had an RSVP, and I'm like, uh-oh.
Right.
And this is not great, cause the TV's up
Screen's over
here,
there.
and they're over there, it's too, where DA training room is a little more.
Are you still taping it over there?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
we
good,
tape
good,
it.
good, cause I wanna watch it.
Yeah, they brought the
yeah, I get
system
to
over
be
to
on
me.
video again, great.
So it's just a little bit more like
So the basis.
comforting, I guess.
And we gotta start talking about round two. So round one was just going to all the schools and kinda
Round
getting,
two is next.
is like, what is the basic overviews? What are ways to reinforce the good behavior, ignore some of the minor behavior, but also the couple of strategies. And what I say to the buildings is, okay, I'm trying to do a lot of years of my experience in a real, if we were training you 9 hours, and in that, you actually have to role play what we're talking about. So right now, all I'm doing is showing you, because all I have is 45, 50 minutes to do it. My goal is, like round 2 is go around and I'm gonna take okay, this would be enough people, like, okay, a couple teachers from this grade, teachers from this grade, teacher in that grade. All right, I'm the kid under the desk, if we're talking elementary or maybe high school. And like, okay, I'm the kid that's tapping, I'm the kid that's humming, and you have to role play those strategies. And what would you do when I put my head down at my desk? Like, so, because people don't know. People come up to me, oh my God, I've never heard of that. I'm like, I don't know, I've been saying it for years, so I'm thinking everybody knows this, right? So that's kind of like round 2 to me, is going into more the same schools, but getting more of it's a workshop where they're actually participating in it and feeling comfortable. Because I say everybody here does what they know, so they've only been shown something they haven't learned. Just like our kids, we show them how to behave, but they still haven't learned it, or they haven't learned a better way to do it. They've learned they do what they know. So same thing with our staff.
And overall, I think it's been positive. I've gone to a couple with Joe, most of the time it's Joe by himself, but there are some where you can tell half the people are making that they have made comments, I've been doing this for 20 years, no one's gonna tell me how to manage my classroom. So then we always wondered, like, if we looked in the discipline referrals, would that be the same? But I'm not gonna do that, but I do wonder if you think that, maybe that is a person that never has an issue. Or maybe it's a person that has more issues, I don't know.
But to my point to that, I want to take that person and be like, okay,
Show us what you do.
So what's the thing in your classroom that's the most annoying, or whatever it is that we want to focus on? All right, I'll be that. And what are you going to do? Go to the office? Like, if that's your go-to, then you're not learning the skills that I'm trying to teach you, because all I did was get what I wanted, which was to avoid your class. So people don't know how to look at things differently because they don't know what to do. They only know what they've been doing for 20 years. They don't know, hey, you could have been doing something else for these last 20 years, because no one showed them
A different way.
a different way. Like I said, all I'm doing is just this initial, so people have talking points. And I've heard other administrators say, it was like, what would Joe do? The kid was banging on the test in the cafeteria. He's like, normally I would have went over there and probably guided him out. Instead, I just, let him bang on the table and move the other kids away from him. Like, but that little shift changed. Or what would Joe say? Is this the hill we want to die on? Well, the kid had his hat on. Like, okay, we moved on. Like, so little things like that can be impactful that they don't get to a write-up, that they don't get to where, how it gets, to me, goes down the line of handling it. So that's my bigger picture. I guess I want to be from the very beginning point versus how to change the end.
When we do the road show together, he has his terms and mine is always it may take an inconvenient amount of time.
I will say that over, what would Rachel say?
Say an
inconvenience
inconvenient amount of time, because it is inconvenient. But if you put the time in now, it's less time in the end.
Yeah.
It's like a.
And I do stress that.
But I gotta be honest, the biggest pushback from that, and I still talk,
Yeah.
we still talk about it, and the teacher's not wrong, what about the 19 other kids who aren't learning because of the inconvenience amount of time that's happening in the classroom?
Well, I personally, that just starts with walls.
Yes, which isn't happening yet.
It was what?
Walls. Like, there's no walls. So one kid having an issue.
But you're getting them.
Yeah.
One kid has an issue.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. One kid has an issue. It's really not 19 kids.
I'm ready
it's
to
like
go in there and
70
like,
kids.
just stop. I mean, yo.
So what I have heard, like some tangible things that
You're
we've
right,
talked
Joe.
about, is
Get
recommend
into
policy
the conversation.
changes to the school committee, recommend possible funding for training for staff and students. Sally was gonna provide us with examples of other restorative justice we'll say matrix, I know Rachel doesn't like that word, but
No,
that are
matrix fine.
more,
I'm okay with it.
that are more restorative justice practicing.
As long as the matrix has options.
Yeah.
Right.
It
Instead of-
can't be linear, it has to be branches.
Right.
So,
It's-
yeah, branches, well, branches, branches.
It can't be kid has hat on, he gets sent to the office. This
Yeah.
is the third time with
That's
your
what
hat on,
teachers
you
want,
get.
but it's
Oh.
there's too many
That's
nuances
not
to
right,
that.
But then it's like, what if he
So-
had his hat on and chewing gum? What if he, like, I've been down this road and you
Right.
start having a handbook that's, like this, but some teachers want, he needs to get this because it said this, and it's like,
That's the problem
that's
with them.
the,
Yeah, I
Right.
thought we had come up with a solution to that, cause
Um,
everybody, when we said matrix, everybody went, no.
so when
Well,
we
we
talk.
can see what Sally provides us, and then we can,
Yeah,
maybe
see
it's
what it-
something we
No,
adapt.
we just don't
that
want
we-
it to be linear, like this equals
Yeah.
this equals
This
that. It has to
this
be more
means this, yeah,
Suggestions.
These are options, you can go here, here, or
options,
here.
yeah.
right.
And then when it happens again, you can go here, and so that, to me, gives you the administrator or the team that flexibility.
Right.
Because if not, you don't need an administrator, you just put it in and here's your
And
outcome.
guidance for the teacher, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
it's guidance, you have multiple options to choose from.
Yeah, I have an actual flow chart that I have, I mean, it's tailored to my setting, but sometimes people don't know that option, like give the kid the first shot, okay, if you happen again, this is what's gonna happen, like, they need that verbiage to kinda help navigate them, cause they're just like, you didn't answer my question immediately, or follow my direction immediately, so X, and, you know, some inconvenient amount of time has to happen processing.
We can talk forever,
Okay.
right? But one last thing I was to say, even when we say kids, that's disrespectful, they look at you like,
What? Yeah.
we have to unpack what disrespectful is, because what's disrespectful to me, you and you,
Don't
is
ask me
different.
that
You have to get
question.
explicit with the behavior.
Right.
And what's modeled in their life is very different.
Yeah, and what's respectful for them at home might be different than the environment and the expectations within our school. I mean, it's
Yeah, I mean, so
real.
funding would be a key thing to, I would think, just when you can get, to get people's time. Whether it be pay for building subs so that you can work with people during the day, or have that allocated for,
That's what I think,
After- Whatever the training, whether it's me, whether
The
it's-
biggest issue is getting money to get people out of the classroom so
Well-
that they can have the training.
Well, you could have the money though, but there are not enough subs to cover. That's a bigger issue than the money. Cause we have money budgeted, we do have money budgeted for things like this, but I even have money budgeted in like, you know, funds, but if I pull them out, they don't have a sub.
I
It's
budgeted
bad.
title, I did the extra common planning time,
Yeah.
you know, so many extra common planning times where teachers would get coverage, but in the first time, I was scrambling trying to get coverage
Okay.
So
for everyone.
let's look at that.
Okay.
That, it's
Well-
more of a coverage issue than a funding
Than a
issue
money
at this
issue,
point. It
okay.
really is, yeah.
and
Okay, that's good to know.
people's,
Yeah.
That's
people's
good to know.
lack of desire to stay after school and get paid for that hour, let's say, is not what they want, so then you're kind of in this.
Right,
Yep.
right.
Okay. Jen's gonna also connect the students about the
Yeah,
survey
yep,
questions.
That's great.
I'm gonna look into the school that just implemented it in the Cape and get some information from them, hopefully. Anything else that I missed? Okay,
Thank you.
so,
Thank you.
thank
I
you
sent
very
the
much.
notes already.
So, okay,
They're
perfect,
gone.
thank
I
you.
sent them.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to adjourn then?
So moved.
Alright, second?
Yeah.
Second, alright, all in favor? Thank you.
Good or bad?
Let's shut this thing off.
Yeah, got it. Oh, yeah, I gotcha.
Go back, have another half of my sandwich thing.
I ate my salad, I'm good.